So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 2025 Kansas Soil Health Partnership Forum. I'm Jennifer Simmelink. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, who is the host of the forum. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. As you've noticed, we're recording this forum, so if you know someone who misses it or you've missed previous ones and you'd like to go back and watch, they'll all be recorded. They'll be posted on the Kansas Soil Health Alliance's YouTube page as well as on our website. We'll also share the links over our social media pages. I'll put a link to where they're housed on our website in the chat in just a moment. To start off the forum today, I'm going to put up a quick 2-question survey. We're just going to use this to help learn who our audience is today. That's going to help give our speaker a little perspective and let us know who we're reaching. So I'm going to get that quiz started here. It's just 2 short questions, so please go ahead and take a moment and answer those questions, and then we'll be set. All right. And so here are our results. Is everyone able to see this, or do I need to share my screen for that? That is the one piece I don't remember. Joanna, help me out with that. Are you able to see the results of the poll?
I see them, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that lets us know who's here. Thank you, everyone, for completing that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joanna, who is our Outreach and Education Coordinator of the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, to introduce today's speaker.
Okay, so today we have Marlon Winger. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree at Utah State University in plant science. He grew up on a family-owned dairy farm in Dayton, Ohio, where he found his professional passion for life, agriculture. He worked as a county agricultural agent for Utah State University Extension Service for 9 years in Price, Utah. He has been working for the USDA NRCS for 18 years as area agronomist in northern Utah and state agronomist in Idaho. And he currently works as the regional soil health specialist for Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and West Texas. Marlon and his family live on a ranchette in Logan, Utah, where the family raises pasture, sheep, goats, and a large garden. Besides his great family, job satisfaction comes from meeting with producers as they learn to implement the principles of soil health. And today, he is going to be talking to us about CEMA 204, the Adaptive Management for Soil Health program.
Well, thank you, Johanna. And one error on that was Dayton, Idaho. Probably there is a Dayton, Ohio, but grew up in the Intermountain West. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Share. Should be able to see it. I'm going to talk about a new thing we're doing in NRCS. It's called a conservation evaluation and monitoring activity. And so we abbreviate it. We call it a CEMA 204 is its number. And it's to work with producers on adaptive management for soil health. And so this is the official document. that we call it, it's kind of a practice standard, but it's not, it's a CEMA. But this is the official document. If you're a NRCS and conservation planner, this is kind of the Bible you go to. It's got the definition of applicable land uses, basic requirements to implement this project. So that's there, but this is kind of boring to go through. So I'm gonna go through a couple documents. So share my screen. I'm going to go to a new document now.
While you do that, Marlon, I'm going to jump in. And for our attendees, if you have a question along the way, just go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask. And then at the end, we'll also have open Q&A. But if you have something along the way, you can either put it in the chat or raise your hand. Don't want you to have to hold on to those until the end.
Okay, this is all okay, here it is. Let's see if this one comes up. Can you see that okay? So
Yes.
we're developing a fact sheet. It's not quite released yet. We still have just a few edits to go on it. But it's a fact sheet, or we call it a design sheet. This document also has frequently asked questions and land use examples that I'll go through in today's presentation. So there's just some basic information to fill out about the producer we're working with. Let me just read this overview. Adaptive management is the process of testing an idea through replicated trials and assessing the results. You start by developing an idea or a hypothesis and proceed by thinking through the details of the experimental design that will test the hypothesis on the farm. So this is something brand new that NRCS has not really done before. You know, generally common practices are like no-till or tree planting or cover crops, but this is an activity that kind of does some on-farm research. And so this may not be exciting and applicable to everybody, but for the nerds out there like me that want to do a little bit of basic research to solve some of their own questions they have on conservation practices, this is an activity that we will pay for. So the next little section is, oh, I forget how many there are, 16 or so different conservation practices that you can work on. One of my favorites is cover crops. You can do no-till 329. You could do residue management, reduced till 345. Maybe there's a project you want to do on your farm to help figure out some nutrient management issues. Or lately we added to this list, we added prescribed grazing. So there are about 16 or so practices that you can choose from and test a idea. Every adaptive management starts with a hypothesis or an idea to improve farmer or rancher engagement. So you start off with a goal or a hypothesis. One I wrote down, just an example, is does no-till improve soil health measurements and yield compared to strip-till in a wheat, soybean, corn rotation? So that's my idea or my hypothesis that I want to test on my own farm. And of course, NRCS is paying you to do this little on-farm research. We're not making this like a PhD program. It's just a pretty simple type comparison where you're comparing treatment A to treatment B. Treatment A may be a no-till treatment, and treatment B could be strip-till. And that's what you would compare, and you're going to compare these for do this little basic research for 3 consecutive years. Just a little on the design sheet, just a few practices that may be implemented. So maybe you're going to implement and test 329 or 345, depends on whatever you're going to evaluate. Whoop, went a little too far. So you're going to have to collect some data collection. So generally, you're going to measure some soil health tests, maybe soil organic matter, pH, are kind of the minimum things you have to do. But if you want to measure things like phospholipid fatty acid or percent germination rate or yield, you can do that. But you have to measure, and I'll go through that, the 3 little soil health tests. Maybe you want to run the Haney test on and do some different evaluations of the Haney test on your 2 treatments. So this is just a little box for the farmer and the qualified individual that's working with the farmer to just kind of do some measurements, methods, timing, responsible party. Probably the biggest challenge in this project, it's not a side-by-side evaluation. You have to do an experimental design where you have to set up replicated plots, and I'll go into that in just a minute. Inside those replicated plots, you want to make sure the field that you're doing is very uniform with respect to slope, soils, drainage, or other inherent soil properties. You don't want to put your middle of your plot in a wash or up on a partial slope. You want to keep things as uniform as possible. There's just a little block here that talks about where you're going to do this project. Tract farm field, total field acres, maybe 2 acres worth of plot trials. You're going to attach a map. This little section talks just a little bit about replications. The minimum number of replications is 3. We recommend 4 replications in case one of them gets hit by a sprayer or gets half of it taken out with a disc or something. So there is some planning to do, 3 replications minimum. In this example, you're going to do it for 2026, 2027, and 2028. You're going to put the plots right back on the same place where you put them the previous year, because we're not interested in just what 1 year of no-till or 1 year of cover crops will do. We want to repeat this on the same footprint for 3 consecutive years. I talked about choosing fields. Here's a good graphic. So this helps you understand what a replication is. So we're just going to say treatment A is no cover crop and treatment B is an 8-way cover crop mix after harvest of the crop. So replication 2, you re-randomize where treatment A and treatment B goes. So you can see that on replication 2, the treatment B is on the left-hand side just by random chance. Replication 3, flip a coin, which one goes first, however you're going to randomize it. Replication 4. So you'll have maybe 4 strips in the field in your replicated plots. Just a little bit of information on relevant cropping or grazing or tree harvest history. And this is all just example data where in my example, I put things. A little bit of information about your soils quickly. This is easily done. So this little section is just a place to collect data, a place to plan your project. I mean, not put your data. Work required, you're gonna have to put out, you're gonna have to flag your plots. Maybe the plots are 50 by 500. You're gonna replicate them 3 times. You're gonna measure soil health tests. We're gonna measure the yield at the end of at harvest time. We're gonna measure that in bushels per acre. Same thing for strip till. We're gonna measure plots, soil health tests, and yield in bushels per acre. And then if you want, this little design sheet kind of gives you outline of what kind of work's required, spring, summer, and fall, winter time. I didn't fill this out 100%. Springtime, for example, we're going to no-till plant with a planter the corn crop, strip till. Then we're going to plant the test plots with the John Deere planter, same planter, just using a strip tiller. Summertime, we're going to take soil health tests from all 6 plots, from each randomized plot treatment. Just some more information if you want to, if you're a calendar typewriter. Then there's a participant signature and certified by your NRCS conservation planner. The next little section, Johanna, if there's any questions that come up, maybe I can stop for just a minute, but there's a lot more I'll talk about in frequently asked questions. Is there any dying questions out there?
Not that I see at the moment.
Okay, so here's we put a couple pages of what we thought conservation planners, qualified individuals, or farmers may have about this new activity. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll go through a couple of them quickly. Question 2. When would a producer consider implementing CEMA 204 on their operation? The soil health adaptive management concept is applicable to growers that are already using a given practice, but may be looking to improve the effectiveness of that practice, or can be useful for a producer using a practice for the first time to learn how to best apply that practice on their own unique landscape and their management style. So you can use it if you're already doing like cover crops. Maybe you want to experiment and see what an 8-way cover crop mix does with a 2-way cover crop mix, and measure some soil health. So I've used this word a little bit, qualified individual. So most of our CEMAs in NRCS, different CEMAs, they built these for people that are qualified to help implement these. And so there's kind of 4 categories in this CEMA. You know, you could have a certified crop advisor help you as a producer, certified professional soil scientist type, an extension specialist from a land grant college, for example, or number 4, a producer that holds a bachelor's degree or higher in the agricultural range, forestry, or soil science fields with at least 2 years of experience using the scientific process to answer questions. This includes experimental design, data collection, analysis. So that's what a qualified individual is. And a qualified individual is self-certified. So if somebody, for example, Tyrell wants to do this project, he just has to self-certify that he meets one of these definitions as a qualified individual. If you don't meet the definitions, then you got to find a qualified individual to help you implement this project. Last I looked, this CEMA activity pays, I think, $3,500 a year to implement this little on-farm demonstration type project. And so it pays $3,500 each year for 3 years. What soil samples are required? That's probably a good one to talk about. We have another CEMA 216 that your conservation planner can help you look at soil health testing guidance. But at a minimum, soil organic carbon by dry combustion, pH, and wet macro aggregate stability should be measured in addition to characteristics identified in the purpose. So like I said before, if you wanted to measure some Haney tests or PLFA analysis, talking with your QI person, you can determine what you want to evaluate and test. Maybe you want to test for, my head's a little fuzzy with this talk, but maybe you want to measure soil respiration and see if respiration is different in your plots. We've reviewed the practices that are available to use for the CEMA 204. We've talked about the questions we've talked about making up a hypothesis or an idea of what to test. Plan the replicated plots. Number F there. So you would complete an in-field soil health assessment for each treatment in the replicated plots. And if you don't know what the complete in-field soil health assessment is, you can talk to your local NRCS office, but it's just evaluating the health of the soil with a shovel, with a infiltration ring, visual evaluations. Number H, you're collecting and monitoring data. I'm going to push through this a little quicker now. At the end of your 3-year project, we ask that the QI and farmer develop a report that talks about, number one, how was the study designed, sampling strategy. It's almost kind of like a materials and methods section. Complete your in-field soil health assessments for each treatment. Maybe you're going to do some in-field laboratory methods, laboratory test results. Maybe you're going to test water infiltration or aggregate stability or Haney test. I've said that. Now, this is where it gets a little sticky, and I'll show you this at the end of my talk. But let's just do yield, because that's what I'm going to show you. If you're going to test yield of your wheat crop, for example, in the 3 replications, you have to run a statistical analysis, and I'll show you how to do that. So if you do a side-by-side comparison, like I've shown you in the example, treatment A versus treatment B, you can do what's called a t-test. If you do something more complicated, maybe with your county extension agent's help, then you're going to have to run an ANOVA analysis. But the t-test is kind of the easiest one to do. You're going to have a results section in your report, just a couple paragraphs about what the findings and results were, interpretations of those results, conclusions, and then a producer statement of intention. Did you learn anything from this project? Are you going to change your management based on this project, etc.? I'm going to move on. We've just off the top of our head, we did some land use examples, and I'm not going to read. I'll try to read one of these. I'll read number 1 for cropland. In a randomized design, compare 2 cover crop treatments, one being a monoculture planting and the other being an 8-species mix. Scenario would be planted after wheat harvest, with the next crop being corn, comparing 3 years of soil health measurements on the yield of corn, for example. A rangeland example, in a randomized design, compare two brush treatments, one being mechanically treated, say, with a shredder or chopper to kill unwanted brush. The other management would be an airplane herbicide spray to kill unwanted brush. So that's an example. You don't have to use these, but it kind of gives you whets your appetite of what is kind of available. Let's see what number 5 is. Let's do number 6. In a randomized design, compare two range plantings, one treatment being 2 species planting, the other treatment would be an 8-way perennial mix. Compare diversity of plants with line intercept method, compare yearly survival rates and yearly biomass. So that's an example of rangeland. Forest land, let's see, let's look at number 8. Randomized design, compare two prescribed burn treatments, one treatment being a spring low intensity burn, the other an early fall or high intensity burn. Compare the survival rates of target brush and weed speed treatments. So that just gives you a little example. Let's do one pasture land. Number 11, we'll do it. In a randomized design, compare residual grazing height, dry matter, weight treatments. One treatment be the recommended residual grazing height, weight. The other being half the recommended residual grazing weight, say maybe at 2 inches compared to 4 inches. Compare soil health, including plant cover, residue cover, plant diversity, soil aggregate stability, plant vigor, and productivity on both sites. So that just gives you some examples of some different potential projects to whet your appetite. Again, you don't have to use these examples, but they're just examples to think about what you would want to do on your own farm or ranch to implement this. I think the only thing I have left to share with you is to show you the t-test, the statistical tool. Is there any questions, folks, on what I've covered so far? Not hearing any. I'm going to stop sharing and open and share another document. So this is our statistical tool for what we call a t-test in statistics. And so in this example, treatment A is comparing no cover crop. Treatment B is going to compare an 8-way mix and see how that affects our wheat yield as our measured variable. So this is as simple as it can get. In treatment A, which is no cover crop, replication 1 had a wheat yield of 24 bushels. Replication 2 had 25 bushels. What do we got here? Rep 3, 29 bushels per acre, and Rep 4, 25 bushels per acre. So that's treatment A, no cover crop. Treatment B, the replications, we planted an 8-way cover crop mix. So the next year when we plant wheat, we're saying, hey, treatment B, Rep 1 yielded 33 bushels per acre, Rep 2, 29, Rep 3, 31, Rep 2, 27. Now, for the scientists in you, you have to pick a significance level, and it's called the alpha level. Another way to say it is we're 95, we're going to test this so that we're confident at the 95% level that this is due to significant differences instead of just random choice. But those are the only numbers you got to put in for yield, and then the computer will tell you, oh, the least significant difference was 5.25, which was not quite high enough to show a statistical difference. Although there was a significant difference, it wasn't significant at the 95% confident level. Now this is not a trick, but it's a way to evaluate statistics. There are other alpha levels that you can compare it to. So sometimes in biological testing, meaning something that's alive, you may not be so concerned at a 95% confidence level, but you can measure it at the 10% alpha or a 90% confidence level that there is a true significant difference. And then the program, the simple t-test analysis, says there is a significant difference between treatment B, which was the cover crop mix at 30 bushel to the acre average, compared to the no treatment at 25 bushels per acre. So that's how you would run an analysis. Let's just in a couple minutes, we could put down a PLFA analysis where you measure how many total biology you have in your ground. And I'm just going to throw in a couple numbers here in nanograms per gram. So I'm going to measure total biomass of microbes. So treatment A was 900, not treatment A, rep A was 900, rep 1 was 900, rep 2 was, we're just going to say 875. Oh, I messed up. 850, we'll say. Rep 4 will be 925. Treatment B with cover crops, our data came back as 910, 954, 890, and we'll say 935, 933. So that's our data that we got from PLFA analysis off of our sheet. And it says it's not significantly different. So for that year's treatment, that's what the report puts back. Let's see now. Oh, I got something messed up. Oh, there it goes. I didn't click it. 921 for our cover crop treatment and 887. So there was too much variability in the replications to show a significant difference. Let's go as low as we can to a 70% confidence level. So even though you can see there was a higher average of population of microbes, 921 compared to 887, there was too much variability within the replications. And so it made it non-significant unless we went clear down to the 70% confidence level. I know that's a little tough if you're not familiar with statistics, but that's why the CEMA 204 says, if you're not very experienced in this, you'll probably want to hire a qualified individual to help you. Well, that's my short presentation on CEMA 204, Adaptive Management for Soil Health. We can certainly open it up for questions. If I've confused you at a higher level, I apologize, but if there's any questions, Johanna or Jennifer, I'll take any. Or comments, whatever.
Sure, that sounds great. I will let everyone attending know that I did switch it so you are able to unmute yourself if you have a question and want to ask it verbally versus in the chat. We did get one question in the Q&A from Candy throughout your presentation. She was wondering if there was a template for the report.
No, we haven't. We haven't done a template for the report. I'm not sure we'll do one, but the frequently asked questions document pretty well outlines what should be in the report. That's a good idea, Candy. Maybe a template for the report would help out. Good comment.
I had a question on it. So when you're talking about the qualified individuals, I was looking at kind of didn't get too in depth. So, for example, I have an ag engineering degree, and then we farmed for however many years. So, do I qualify under that, or would I still need to seek a crop advisor or extension agent?
So the crazy thing about the qualified individual is it's self-certification, self-certified. You can say, yes, I know enough about how to set up a replicated, randomized plot, and I understand a little bit how to set up and use a spreadsheet like this to enter your data. So my guess is I would say yes, you probably are, but it's self-certified. You don't have to have my permission to be a QI.
Great. We have another question in the chat, which is one that I had as well. So it says, does this data stay with the producer, or is there any thoughts to develop material for other producers to see what has been investigated?
I think the intent is just to stay with the producer. If they want to share it, if they want to share it with the Kansas Soil Health Alliance, more power to them.
That
But they don't have to share it.
that is something, when we've learned about this and other trials that are existing, is something that we're going to be working towards. So
Yeah.
it would be great to have that available so we can all learn from each other. I see these as great opportunities for, I know I can see several names on the attendees list for a great way to create some field days. Get some funding for our producers to be able to do these experiments, and then work with organizations and those in county to share these and help others learn from it and have some good field days.
Oh, I do too, Jennifer. I think that's a good comment. If you had 2 or 3 producers that were testing out the same treatments, if they both wanted to learn about, 2 or 3 guys wanted to learn about multi-species cover crop mixes compared to just planting cereal rye, for example, then having 3 or 4 people work on the same project, I think would be good. And each one of them could, apply for a SEMA 204 through EQIP, and hopefully that all get funded, and then could have one big project in the county.
Great. We keep having more questions come through, so I'm going to keep asking them because they're great ones. Do you have any recommendations on how to prioritize variables that a producer should investigate?
Variables to investigate. I might have to have Candy help me out on this. I think I listed some, like you could use components of the Haney test. You could use PLFA. You could use infiltration rates. Candy, help me out.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said was pretty decent. I mean, the thing about adding in more variables, like Marlon said, then you're going to have more than one treatment. So that will add some complexity to the design, but it's not totally undoable. I mean, Excel has the capability of doing analysis of variance testing. It's really simple. I mean, that's what this spreadsheet was essentially built off of. I know I used it because I didn't have access to SAS when I did my master's. I worked with Dr. Tom Casper, and we just used Excel. You just turn on the statistical portion of Excel, which is kind of hidden. It's not really seen here. And then you could add in those different treatments like you were mentioning. Let's see, other than those, the one thing I know that we have a problem with here in Kansas is water. So water could be one of your treatments. if you have an irrigated field versus a dry land field, you could compare water use efficiency of different cover crops. That's
Yeah.
another thought.
Remember whatever you're testing, whatever variable or indicator that you're testing, you got to evaluate it in all the replications. So if you're going to test, let's say water moisture at harvest, soil moisture at harvest, you know, how much water was left from a certain treatment, you got to do that for all the replications. Good question.
We have another one in the chat here. It says, when are the deadlines for application and how certain is funding?
Applications, every state has their deadline when you have to submit, you know, sign up for an EQIP project. You make your plan. Who knows what the future of NRCS funding will be? In my state that I work in, I've worked in Wyoming and Utah now lately, you get about 40% of the applications funded, but it's based on a ranking criteria because we have more applications than we have money. So the higher you rank in points, the more probability of getting funded. That's a question you probably have to ask your own NRCS office. And I guess, Candy, it probably also determines how many ranking points they give you to do a project like this.
Yeah, that's pretty much up to your state and whether or not they prioritize soil health as a funding mechanism.
Yeah.
And you know, if that's not a priority, then it'll be fairly lower down in the stack of things that people get to fund. But like Marlon said, the more practices you can add to this, probably the better. This can also be part of our CPA, that's that conservation planning activity 116, which is doing a soil health plan and then seeing which practices you want to improve to add to your soil health, your overall soil health plan. I mean, you could add that to it as well. These CEMAs are a little strange, and I think our field office don't even understand them.
Yeah,
neither do we.
It's gonna be new for our planners even. But when you sign up for this, for example, if you're gonna test cover crop, do a cover crop A and B treatment, the conservation practice that you would be under would be cover crops. So if your state or your area has a priority and EQIP to implement cover crops, would be under the cover crop practice standard. Or if it's nutrient management or no-till, you know, so that's the practice you'd be doing, is adaptive management for no-till. Adaptive management for soil health, no-till. So now that gives me a second to think about it. If you apply for this, just like any other, if you only apply for cover crops through EQIP, you know, it depends on how much ranking points get assigned to the practice cover crops, but there's a decent chance of getting it funded because it's funded under the cover crop practice standard or under the prescribed grazing practice standard if you wanted to evaluate, you know, management intensive grazing versus no prescribed grazing.
Hey, Marlon, since you brought it up, you're talking about replicated trials. So on the grazing, how are they doing replicated trials when it comes to grazing? Because most people aren't going to do 500 strips and replicate it. Does grazing fall under a different category as far as if it's on, say, native range, where you can compare planned and intensive grazing on an 80 versus set stocked on an 80 right beside it type of thing, and you just do that for years?
Yes, that's an idea. Now, the hard part that you identified that's rep 1. That's replication 1. So within those two side-by-side 80s, you're probably going to have to pull electric fence and cut those into 30-acre treatments with an electric fence.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to take a little. So it's the same thing with a burn. If you're burning a shrubby piece of ground, low intensity burn or high intensity burn, it really becomes a challenge setting up the 3 replicated plots.
Right. Right. Yep.
But
Okay.
it's doable. It's doable, but you got to have them big enough so that they just when you let your cattle out in treatment 1 for 10 days, they just don't trample it, that they have enough to graze or not graze.
Gotcha.
Sometimes I've seen university research and their grazing treatment was on 1/10 of an acre. Well, hell, the 1/10 of an acre they got so nervous being confined to 1/10 of an acre electric fence that they pounded out the grass before they even grazed it.
Right. So basically, it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. It's just you got to be able to have multiple replications of it, essentially.
That's correct. And that is a tougher one compared to, doing no-till versus strip-till on corn ground.
Sure.
So,
Now on the cover crop side, let's say you're trying to experiment with cover crops. Since it's an experiment, are you able to not necessarily exactly follow NRCS recommendations on certain seeding rates, certain seeding dates, certain species? It's an open experiment, so you can play with it. You can basically set your experiment up exactly how you want.
that's how I see it. You can because it's your project. It's your project. If you want to, yeah, that's how I see it. I may be wrong, but it's your project as long as your conservation planner that's approving the contract doesn't fall off his chair when you tell him what you're going to do. I think you'll be right. But
just make sure you're holding the chair up.
Yeah, prop the damn chair up with some duct tape or something. But you wanna go through this evaluation and treatments and replications, before you get funded.
Right.
You don't want to say, "Oh, I got funded. Now what am I going to do?" He says, "Oh, we're not agreeing to that."
Yep.
But if you want to evaluate a 10-way cover crop mix, and it's got some species that are kind of funky, it's your project. That's how I see it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I wouldn't support planting Scotch thistle and leafy spurge as one of my cover crop species, right? There's got to be some common sense in it.
Candace, I saw a hand up and you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, I had a box that popped up that said
Oh.
trying to unmute your microphone, and I'm like, I don't know why.
Just didn't want to miss anything.
Candace is works for NRCS Soil Health Division, and she's had her hands in helping me develop this CEMA 204 document. So appreciate Candace's support on that.
So Marlon, do you need to get approved for equip before you can apply for a CEMA, or is it all in the same application process?
Well, you can sign up, you go into your office and say, I want to sign up for an equip project, and they'll say, well, what are you concerned about? What's your resource concerns? I said, well, I've learned about this CEMA 204 project where I want to evaluate 2 different cover crop mixes. Or maybe I want to have a heavy legume cover crop mix and see if I can cut down on my nitrogen by 90% or something like that. So you got to talk about what your resource concern is. Hopefully the planner will go out with you, look at the system, and then start working on, you know, what you're going to do for this basic research project. And then they'll submit with you as a producer. The NRCS office will submit your application for EQIP funding, and then you just have to kind of sit back and wait to see if you get ranked out or not. But I think it's good to always do some conservation planning before you get, obviously before you get the EQIP funding, because this is kind of a big deal. This is a big deal, and it pays quite significant amount of money. And Candace can maybe help me out on this, but I thought it was $3,500 a year for 3 years. Am I right, Candace, or am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, it's around, I don't know, 3,900 per year for 3
Okay.
years. We're asking that you do this for at least a minimum of 3 years, so it'll be contracted yearly. And
Yeah.
each year, and the funds are for the planning, and the, you know, the labor. It mostly consists of labor costs to do the planning and monitoring.
Yeah. And there's some money there, you know, you don't have to use all the money for labor. You can use some of it to do soil health testing, and that's a requirement. You just can't measure yield. You have to do some soil health testing.
And yes, and the cost includes testing for soil health metrics, whatever the participant and the person helping them plan determine would best address their management decisions as part of the CEMA.
So if 3 years is the minimum, what could the maximum length of time be?
I think the maximum would be 5.
Yeah.
Am I right, Candace?
That's actually a really good question. For CEMAs, the lifespan is 1 year. However, if you're doing it, if you're trying to evaluate it as part of a practice that you do not have yet implemented, then most management practices have a 5-year lifespan. If you are, let's say you already have a soil health management system, you know, at your operation, and you just want to change something about how you manage cover crops, then the management component of the practice itself is not an issue because you've already have it planned. It's already implemented. It's already part of your operation, and so you're just tweaking it. And in that case, you can do the CEMA every year with no limit because it is has a 1-year lifespan. So you can contract it every year.
Yeah, my 2-cent suggestion to a producer, based on my opinion, would be don't do a project longer than 3 years, because you'll probably want to change something and do it again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, evaluate something else. So I wouldn't lock myself into more than 3 years of a project.
Yeah. And Marlon, and to that point, most often when NRCS is working with a participant and developing a contract, they tend not to do more. I mean, you can do, I think a contract can be up to 10 years, but we're providing assistance, potentially technical and financial assistance. And so they try to, do a contract for around 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you have to reapply every year?
No, you can, in your ranking period, you can say, I want to do this for 3 years in your ranking or contract. You're going to say, how long do you want to do it? And it says, well, it's recommended you got to do CEMA for 3 years, because 1 year of data is not going to show you much, right? Maybe your percent organic matter is only going to change by 0.1% in a year. So your first year, you might not even see a difference, but generally when you set it up, you'd set it up for a 3-year contract. Just like if you were doing no-till for 3 years.
I see one more question, and it might be the last one before we've got to end here. It says, can I sign up for cover crops and soil health testing through EQIP the same time I sign up for this CEMA?
Yes, I think you can. Yes, you can. But you're getting paid $3,900 to evaluate, you know, in year 1, year 2, and year 3. So I don't know if it's overkill, but yes, you could sign up for more.
All right, we're just about to the top of the hour. If anyone else has a question, I think we have just a second. You can drop it in or unmute and ask.
I do have a 1-800 number for the participants online. So write this down, 1-800-CANDY-THOMAS.
I love it. All right. I want to thank you so much, Marlon, for joining us. We really appreciate this. As I said, for those of you who are listening, this is recorded. We'll put it out there to share with others. But if we're trying to take notes or there's something you want to go back and see, we will have this posted probably within the next few days that you'll be able to go back and see the recording. And Joanna, you're keeping track of this more than me. Do we have an introduction, a little teaser for next month's call?
Lance Gunderson is going to be speaking to us about the how to interpret a Haney test.
That's right. So that'll be a great follow-up from this, kind of ties in some of those together. So we will send all that information. If you registered for this one, you should be already registered for all of them, but you'll get the reminders so that we don't forget about it next month, which that will be on Thursday, April 24th, again at noon. So thank you everyone for joining us. Special thanks, Marlon, and hope everyone has a great afternoon.